We will go ahead and get started. First of all, my name is Scott Drillette. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations for the district. New here, been here about 5 months, but getting my feet wet right away. And so I wanted to say thank you for being here, taking time out of your evening. We spent a lot of time in planning for not just this elementary number 5, but for all things in the district, and whether it's construction or whether it's our start of the school year. There's a lot of things that's going on here, as I'm sure you can imagine. And so what we want to do tonight is just talk about a little bit about elementary number 5, where we are in the process, and really at this point we're really backing up. And so we have spent a lot of time over the summer, kind of doing some planning. We've also been working, I know Doug and Clint and Mike has spent a lot of time working with the Walnut Springs and working with the teachers and the campuses from both the middle school and the elementary on that one, and also many community members. But we haven't had as much involvement on elementary number 5. So we're trying to step back and go make sure that what we do is responsible, and not just in regards to elementary number 5, but anything that has to do with that and that Dardenville property. So we do know that our decision has been made to put the elementary there, and so now with that decision being made, we're stepping back and going, what's the best path going forward? And so we're going to drive this meeting tonight, and it's going to be a little bit of a presentation, but it's also going to be, we want feedback. We want to hear the concerns and the suggestions, not just concerns, but suggestions and ideas that you have for us. And so at this point, our architect is Corgan, and Doug Caney is our lead architect, and I'm going to turn it over to him. And then, like I said, I will jump in and ask questions of myself. We have Clint Pruitt here, he's our Director of Facilities. And then we have Mike Garcia, and he's our Program Manager. So great knowledge for wealth of knowledge. So, and then of course our new interim superintendent, I'd like to introduce her. I'm sorry I didn't. I'll apologize again later. This is Dr. Nola Wellman. And so she's coming in, and she's...
Thank you for being here. This is very helpful to us, what we hear from you. So thank you very much.
She has hit the ground running, and I don't mean to say she's hit the ground running. She's been great to work with, so I'm hoping that that my contract renews. So no, it's I think she's done a great job, and we're obviously in a transition period, but we're going to work through, and we're going to do what's right for not just our staff. We're going to do what's right for our students and our community. And so just appreciate you being here, and we value your time. So we're going to get right to it. I want to turn it over to Doug.
Great. Thank you very much. Just to kind of follow up on a little bit on what Scott says, is that whenever you're doing a brand new kind of elementary school from scratch, one of the unique challenges is that you don't have kind of this built-in community to kind of pull information from. Kind of comparing it to the Walnut Springs process is that we have a group of teachers to go and ask them kind of what are the priorities, what are the things that they like, don't like, they want to change, and things like that. We've got administrators, we've got parents in a community base that attend that school, and you're able to kind of talk to them and get some great feedback for the things that they deal with on a day-to-day or a week-to-week basis with having their kids go to the school, and the things that they interact with the campus on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis. So when you have a new school being built on a kind of a new separate site, you don't have that built-in teacher community or that parent community to kind of pull some of that great feedback, that kind of I call a feedback loop, where you kind of present, gather information, work through that information, and then kind of take it back out to everybody to kind of continually kind of go back and forth and get that great information that kind of helps narrow your focus to hopefully get you down that right path from a design standpoint, a functional standpoint, kind of all those things. And so definitely appreciate you guys coming out tonight. I mean, y'all's feedback really helps us kind of make sure that we're heading in the right direction for the future teachers and students that will be going to elementary school number 5. We're also at the same time we're meeting, we've kind of gathered teachers from all 4 elementary schools in the campus, and we'll be meeting with them today and tomorrow, and also kind of throughout the process to kind of get that teacher educational feedback as well. It's a different perspective and a different view that is so important. So we're hoping with y'all's feedback and other people in the district's feedback and the teachers' feedback, that really gets us a lot of great information to kind of make sure that when we end up with the design and get to the point where the school is being constructed, that it ends up being exactly what you guys want in your community and for your kids. So in saying that, the first thing I'd like to do is just kind of go over what's the scope of this particular project. So we know it's a brand new elementary school from scratch. There's no existing buildings on the site or anything like that. It's just an empty site right now. We're looking at building a school for about 850 kids. Included in that are all kind of the side amenities with bringing up parent and student drop-off from buses or from cars, things like that, parking for parents, parking for visitors, parking for staff, things like that. In addition, because it's a little bit of a site that's not on a mainstream road right now, it certainly will be in the future, but there's some site utility issues that we've got to investigate and look at, from where do we take sanitary, what do we do with sanitary, what do we do with water, what do we do with gas, electrical, kind of things like that. So as we're going through this kind of initial process, we're having our consultants and we're working with the city and the county and kind of those specific groups to kind of figure out what are the avenues to kind of bring those infrastructure items to that particular site. And then the third thing that we're kind of looking at, and this kind of goes into what we're doing tonight, is looking at a feasibility study. We know, I'll jump ahead a little bit, but we know that this is a big site. It's about 150 acres, plus about a 5-acre area right there where we've got Sawyer Ranch, that's Darden Hill Road right there. And then you can kind of see the site all down there. But it's about 155 acres total when you add that 5-acre block right next to that intersection right there. And the district bought this a number of years ago, and the potential that there could be a certain amount of development from a school standpoint that would happen on the site. And so with this 2018 bond election, we know that first part of potentially what could be built on this site would be an elementary school. And looking at, going back and looking at the schedule, what we're looking at is right now going through that design and documentation process. We've worked on it a little bit over the last couple of months. We think that this is a great time to kind of halt a little bit and get some additional feedback, both from a site standpoint as well as kind of a building standpoint, priority standpoint, for what are the important pieces of the school that we want to make sure that we build into it. And we'll be kind of working through that design and documentation process early into next year, into January, February sometime. At that point, we'll have our construction manager, who's already on board, to kind of take that, gather some bidding and kind of cost information, and then the goal would be to probably right around April or so kind of bring that to the board for their consideration. And then from that point, you're looking at a 13 or 14-month construction process, so the end of the construction cycle would be kind of that summer of 2021, and the school itself would open in that fall of 2021 school year. So going back to the site, one of the very first things, especially when you're starting to look at kind of what's feasible on that site, what are kind of the things that can fit? You want to make sure that you kind of look at kind of everything that might potentially need to go on that site before you even start the first project, so that you know that you've left yourself some flexibility and adaptability to kind of hopefully allow yourself some of those options for some of that future development. So the 4 things that the district has discussed at some point or another that potentially could go on the site is the elementary school, which is part of the 2018 bond, but also potentially a middle school, potentially a high school, and then potentially a second transportation hub once the transportation hub just west of here on 290 kind of fills up. It's almost near capacity. We're doing some improvements in this bond to extend the capacity of that over the next 5 to 10 years, but we know at some point there would need to be a second transportation site that would need to go somewhere in the district. So looking at those 4 potential kind of different buildings or different projects, one of the things that we wanted to look at before we started any design work was to really look at kind of, could you fit all 4 of those pieces on this size site with the topography and the trees and kind of all that stuff. So one of the very first things that we look at is how big are those typical projects. So we know that an elementary school is typically about a 10 to a 15 acre project. We know that a middle school can be a 25 to 30 acre project that it takes up that land with some additional athletic, fields and things like that around it. A high school, again, depending on kind of what support facilities would be attached to that high school, could be anywhere from 80 to 100 acres. And then a transportation facility, again, we're a little bit of a smaller footprint, about 10 to 15 acres from that standpoint. So when you start adding kind of all those things together and average those things out, you're looking at about 140 to 150 acres worth of development right there. So we think from a size standpoint that if the district and the community decides that those type of facilities would be located on this site, we think right off the bat that we've got the amount of land to do those things. And so I think the next question, what we'd love to kind of start getting some of y'all's feedback on, is that if we do start looking at those type of potential developments, let's have some conversation about kind of where, this is the first school, where would the school go? Where would the middle school go? Where would transportation go? Things like that. What are the pros and cons of locating those on various parts of the site? As you can see, if you look at it, and I don't know, everybody raise their hand if you're kind of familiar, if you've driven by this site, if you've got some familiarity there. So when you drive by it, it looks it's one of the flatter pieces of land actually out in this area, and it looks fairly level. But when you actually look at the topography, there's actually some pretty distinct movement kind of up and down. There's a kind of a high point hill right here, and then as you kind of go towards some of the corners and things like that, the land kind of levels off a little bit. So you've got some high points, you've got some low points that you kind of need to look at from a drainage standpoint, and kind of what, kind of maybe fits in the topography there. You've also kind of got this great kind of natural tree line that kind of runs south and southwest of the site right here, but really the majority of the site is a pretty open area that has some slope, but not too much of a significant slope. And then in addition, you've got kind of some built-in kind of retaining pond kind of collection water areas that are already out there existing, and those certainly could be opportunities to either catch water from a drainage standpoint, or even capture that water and redistribute it from irrigation or something like that. So those are kind of some opportunities kind of there. So I guess right off the bat, before I kind of get into anything else, I'd love to maybe get some feedback on the site and maybe some initial thoughts of what you think of the site and what you think of potentially if with the elementary school going here, maybe what are some of your initial thoughts on where or kind of how to configure that elementary school on the site itself.
I guess before you even consider those, I would wonder what you're thinking about as far as the transportation needs and the emergency medical services needs to grow from 850 kids to, 1,400 to 2,000 kids. What's going to happen to the road? Do you think there's a big enough infrastructure road-wise to do this?
Well, one of the things that we've started the process on is we've actually met with the city, the county, and TxDOT, kind of some of those transportation groups to talk about, we know what it kind of looks at now, but what is the 5, 10, 15, 20-year plan for kind of that area, and what are the traffic implications. So we've actually started a traffic kind of study process to look at this, which not only looks at what goes on right now, but the potential of kind of where it's going to be in that next 5, 10, 15 years.
I think we're probably both going to say the same thing.
Go ahead.
How does the community become involved with that? Because there are people on these streets.
On the streets. And
that neighborhood right around.
Well, and the study that you're proposing, is it only Gardenville from 1826 to Sawyer Ranch? Or is it Gardenville?
So you mean kind of how far are the extents?
That's right.
I think that we can look at that. I mean, probably right now it's more specific to kind of going up Sawyer and kind of a certain length kind of away from the potential site. But, we can certainly look at if there's a necessity to kind of look even beyond that.
Is Dardanville going to be looked at at all?
Yes. That's
I mean, 1826 rather.
I don't know if it extends down there, but I'll double check on that. But if certainly we can have that discussion if we need to extend that zone of traffic study. That's something that we can definitely.
So I can tell you from experience that they're talking about widening that road right now. If you guys are thinking about putting 3 schools in a transportation hub, you probably want to get ahead of just a turn lane in there and go something. Because if you go 2 properties down, I own the property on the corner there. So when you put the middle school in Sawyer Ranch, the traffic significantly went up across there. And my guess is that you're going to have to widen both Sawyer Ranch and Darden Hill. And I would request that you get in front of it and don't do this piecemeal thing. You know, widen it, 1 lane now, and then 5 years from now, we're looking at what 1826 has been doing, which is we put in a turn lane here, we put in a turn lane there. And then there will need to be traffic lights on 1826 or else somebody's going to get killed there.
And I think our discussions with those groups have started off on the right path. We've kind of had that same conversation with them, is that we want to make sure that they have all the information that the district has discussed, either currently right now or potentially in the future, so that as they're working towards those longer-term master plans from a development and infrastructure standpoint, they can start including that stuff. And some of the information they had, and some of it we were given to them just with the information that we had. And so I think right off the bat we've had some good conversations with them to kind of update what they already knew. And the idea is that we're going to be getting together on a really regular basis throughout the course of this project. So not only are we kind of solving the immediate needs over the next 2 to 3, 4 years for this particular site, but making sure that they understand kind of how this site fits into kind of their overall projections from a development standpoint, things like that. So
yeah, because my back of the envelope calculation says you're going to put 6,000 people on that property with all the cars and supporting equipment and everything else. We just got water down there. We just have, there's no sewer, there's no anything else. So I would just like to see some long-range planning that says we don't have to do this again and again and again.
I don't know how many of you have been around long enough to know this, but when they did the airport in Austin, when they opened ABIA, Highway 71 hadn't been touched, and it was a nightmare for years. We're getting ready to do the same thing here. With all that development on that, if we don't get some type of transportation plan or something going, it's going to be a nightmare.
And I would suggest maybe for the next community meeting, we can show the county's plan. The county already has a plan to widen.
That's just from 1826 to Sawyer Ranch.
But at least we can all be looking at the same thing and seeing what their plan, see what that road profile is, turning lane.
They're talking about widening Darden, but right now it's like a turn lane, right? I can tell you right now, that's not going to be sufficient for what you guys are looking at.
Holy cow, Goldsmith has said that they've done the studies. Correct me if I'm wrong, they've done the studies. There's no money. He has no money earmarked right now to get that done. So if you're saying there is, somebody's not talking to somebody else.
Right.
And I'd like to know who at the county you've been talking to.
And so and again, we had our first initial meeting a few weeks ago, and we know that in that meeting that we've kind of set up, we're going to be continually kind of going back and forth on a really regular basis through the process and through the construction process to make sure that they're up to date with everything the district's planning. So,
and again, I think we're getting the cart before the horse here. We're residents right there.
Right there.
And the roads need to be taken care of before you start bringing in all these vehicles.
And quite honestly, they're already surveying how to widen that road with a turn lane, so you're already behind. That is in their bond that they passed, that the county passed in the last election to get that widened, and now we're seeing survey stakes go out for route the road's going to be widened. So a single turn lane is not going to be enough, but in my opinion, you're already behind talking to getting them to do that road properly the first time, or we're just going to be constantly trying to widen it and put in lights, and it's not, you're behind.
I was just going to ask a question related to transportation. When you look at the district's attendance zone maps, where are these students going to come from? Currently, most of the students are going to Sycamore Springs, which is 2 miles just north of Sawyer Ranch Road. Are these kids going to be bused north of 290 down to this Darden Hill campus? Are kids going to get pulled in from Sycamore Springs? Basically, there's 2 schools real close. I see transportation issues because there's not actually students there yet. Originally, the district was planning to put this school somewhere else. So is there going to be a lot of students bused from further away? so that they don't have to split campuses from where they are now, kind of what that looks like long-term and how that affects the transportation plan.
So if I need to interject myself, I'm Carrie Kroll, I'm president of the school board, and there's several of us here tonight. Sorry for not introducing myself earlier. I grew up in Dripping Springs, and I was in this school when it was K through 12, so I very much understand what community looked like and how it's grown rapidly and the concerns that are addressed are included in that. I think it would be helpful for this process for us all to remember that when we purchased this property when? 2007. So many years ago, knowing that the demographics were trending in a way where we were going to have more people and we need to be prepared. And I think everybody in the room understands that it's very hard now to find large tracts of land that are affordable to house the students that are coming. We know that we're coming. We pay for demographic updates almost annually now. And our schools continue to grow at about a rate of 5 to 6% every year. So that's inevitable. It's happening. And we need to be smart about it. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is to talk about the 5th elementary school, which we have no property for immediately to build that's ready to be built on but this. And these are kids that are coming that are projected to need to be housed in a building starting in 2021. So we have one role in that, which is to identify as the school district where we can put kids in buildings and identify how to do that in the best way. We're one partner in several, so it's the county and the city that have to work with us on the roads. So we absolutely agree. We have to be smart about how we do it. We have to be safe about how we do it, but we are not in a position to single-handedly make all those decisions by ourselves right now. What we have to do right now is figure out how to best use the property to educate the kids, and then we will take feedback from you into that process. This is one of many meetings, so that we can work with those other partners and make it work long-term. We have zero clue, and you know this, I think, everyone knows this, about what kids are going to go there, because we'll have kids that show up after Labor Day that want to come to school in our district. They're moving everywhere, and so it's a constant battle to figure out how we're going to keep them in classrooms that are appropriate for their size. So that discussion is way down the road. We know, though, from the demographer who has gone and knocked on houses and visited with all the ranch land and knows all the developments, that the majority of the growth is coming from the area of the district where this property is. So you can guarantee that my kids that live over here are not going to be going to that school. That's pretty much the only guarantee we can give you. It's going to be kids that are moving in this area. Once the campus is open, we will draw lines and figure out flow of children, who's going to what school, and all of that. But that's a future conversation. And so for tonight, we want to capture all of your concerns about traffic. We absolutely want to be smart about it. We get that we're going to have to work with other partners, but if we could stay focused on the task at hand, which is making sure that we have a discussion about what we want to do and how we want elementary 5 to be successful, that would be great. And so maybe if we could move through the presentation a little bit and then have questions towards the end so that you can see where we're headed and maybe address some of the issues that are coming to mind. Otherwise, I don't know that we'll get very far if we continue to. And I know, I get, it's nerve-wracking when you see all of this change happening rapidly, especially when you've been out here for years and have property and people want to build a school next to it. I get it. So, yes.
I was just going to ask, so the Mount Gainer doesn't make more sense logistically, the 24 acres you own there already for an elementary school?
Yeah.
We've talked to the demographer
right.
about when we made the decision that we were going to move elementary 5. For a long time, I don't think it was a big secret that for a long time it was talked about elementary number 5 could be somewhere near Headwaters, right? And then we made the decision in May that we were going to move the elementary number 5. As part of making that decision, we had that conversation with the demographer, and they said that they believe that this is absolutely the right location for the next elementary school.
My concern is so far in the southeast is right next to a new school, and then all this conversation about traffic raises concern. Are going to be forcing kids to travel further distances on account of the school being located here and the population not necessarily being aligned with that. I mean, yes, it's the eastern side of the district, but it's not the far southeast.
But I know that Sycamore Springs Elementary School is approaching 1,000 students this year and will be over 1,000 students next year, and so there will very likely be, we were able to move stuff around within the building and actually get all the students in the building for this year. Next year, there will very likely be portables at Sycamore Springs. So some of those students have to go somewhere.
Okay, and I had one more question, I guess, is related to that long-term plan. So according to the May demographer report, we're looking at an additional 2,200 students if we're going to keep the same number of buildings. Are we looking at that additional, it would be 1,100 kids, 3,650 that would be in high schools, and 600 extra that would be in middle schools, and an extra 500 that would be in an elementary? If we're going to put 3 schools that size, would they fit on this piece of land?
Yes.
And that's exactly where we're going with this process. And so again, when we first started looking at this site, the first thing that we did is we went back and looked at what are typical sizes for an elementary, for a middle, for a high school, for transportation. And again, those vary depending on kind of the functions and the size. Is it 100 buses or 50 buses? Is it 850 students? Is it 500 students? Is it 2,000 students? Is it 1,500 students? So, and that's why you kind of see those ranges. But when you kind of add up kind of right around the average of all those, you end up at about 140 to 145 acres. We've got 155 acres here. So just in that initial kind of look at least from a size standpoint, does it make sense? And the answer is yes. And then as we go through this process and take y'all's feedback and start looking at how you might kind of locate and move kind of those particular developments around, we can certainly look in more detail about kind of how those things are configured, how they relate to each other, the traffic flow to those different elements and things like that.
Yeah, I guess specifically, is it based upon 850 elementary campus and 850 middle school campus and the 2,500 high school campus? Or, I mean, if we're looking at a 1,300 right now with the demographer set, if we keep some of our facilities, we're looking at 1,350 for elementary, 1,450 for middle school, and 3,650 for high schools. And so that's a 60% increase for elementary, a 70% increase for middle schools, and a 50% increase for high schools. So if we're looking at 140 to 145 acres, I mean, that's, if you add a 50% plus onto that, I mean, we're way beyond the limitations that we have.
I want to interject, and I think what we're trying to do tonight is talk about elementary number 5 as much as possible, because we can only bite off so much at one time. And so while we look at the big picture, when we talk about all this, this site is not going to be the end-all be-all for the district. I mean, the district's going to grow beyond, and so we have to know that. So our goal here is to hear concerns so that then we can take those concerns and be more aware of maybe something that we're not aware of. We like to think that we are, and but then we can take that and move forward with it.
No, I understand the concern.
So I think if we can't really be in the process of saying, hey, we have every answer. We never have every answer, but we do plan ahead, and we are looking at these things. So, but I think the conversation tonight, we're trying to gear toward this elementary number 5. And if we
I
get,
fully understand that.
Okay.
My concern is that I feel like we got all this new information in May, and the district is making all these plans for facilities that are way too small for what we learned in May, that the district paid however many tens of thousands for this demographer report. So it seems like we're putting the cart before the horse. If you're building schools at 850 and or you're reducing your middle schools to 850, and we're at 900 already at Dripping Springs Middle School. So my concern as a taxpayer is that the plans are using the most recent information that's approved in fiscal course forward. So I'm just trying to figure out if we're looking at this potentially being a 3 high school campus, are we looking at if we want this to be a middle school, high school, and elementary, and we're going to try to squeeze on this piece of land, or are we committing the district to a 3rd high school down the road?
So the only thing we're doing tonight is talking about elementary 5. We have not discussed 850 to 1250. That's a discussion that's coming. We don't know that we're capping the sizes. What we do know is that we're growing community schools based on what our community has asked us to build, to house students that are coming at a reasonable response to what the growth is, knowing that the growth is gradually increasing. So what we need to do now is focus on this. It is conceivable that we will have future conversations, and you know this, about 1 to 2 high schools, and then we'll have future conversations about the size of the middle schools, but there's no predetermined discussion right now about that. Right now, we're trying to figure out, with regard to elementary school 5 and this property, what we're going to do.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is I'm concerned that there's not that discussion.
I appreciate the concern, and I think that you are welcome to continue raising that, and that we will make sure the other board members know that you're concerned. We're putting a lot of money and time and effort into our planning and working with the demographer and trying to listen to what to do that's best.
But I'm with him, that I guess what we wanted to hear is reassurance that actually, yes, we have taken the most current data and it is being incorporated into the plan for this elementary.
That is accurate. We are doing that. His question about 1 to 2 high schools, whether or not we're going to cap middle schools at 850 versus 1250, those discussions have not been finalized.
Yeah,
But for
I think
the
he started
size
out
of
with,
this,
are you using the most current demographers?
we
data?
are. And we got the most current demographer data. This is what's being used in developing the plans for this elementary. That's an easy answer.
Yes, and I would say for sure we're using the most recent, that we work with, gosh, I can't think of her name. PASA, but I'm trying to think of her name. Dr. Tapera. And so, those presentations and what she provides, that's exactly what we're using. And so that there's projections that we're going to be, the goal is that we're going to have to build new campuses when we're at 120% capacity. And so that we can, we'd rather be at 100%, but we can go to 120% and then be prepared to open a new campus. And that's our schedule, and that's our alignment, and that's our focus. And so, right now, we are on this elementary 5. We're on the elementary, Walnut Springs. We're on the high school renovation, but we're also, with that long-range facility planning process, thinking about that and basing our decisions also on that. And so you're trying to work on the current project, but you're also looking forward to the future.
That's supposed to be done this fall, right? September, and I think November, the planned meetings. So I'm on that committee. And so what I'm saying is there's 8 elementaries right now that are supposed to be 850. There's supposed to be 4 middle schools that are supposed to be 850. And there's supposed to be 2 high schools that are 250 according to the path 2 that was for the 2018 bond. And so when you look at the numbers with the demographic, the PASA thing, and we're spending an extra $50 million or supposed to across the 2018-2019 bond for that plan, we're looking at, based upon the latest PASA numbers, if we're keeping the same number of buildings, you're looking at 1,350 for elementary, you're looking at 1,450 for middle school, and 3,650 for high school. And so what I'm asking is, can we fit that many students on this if we do 3 campuses? It's basically the extent of my question.
We can fit it all there, and we can. What, do we want to? We don't know that. So the answer is yes, we can fit them there. But tonight, we're going to look at elementary school 5 for the purposes of this discussion.
Okay.
Can I speak to the 850 number per student? One of the issues, and this was discussed a lot in the 2018 bond process, when we had a demographer's report just for that bond process. PASA has worked with the district for years and years. I'm sure that Clint or Dale can, and the previous demographers' reports may even be on the website, is you want to also have parity across the district in terms of elementary school size. Rooster can't grow at all. Rooster is 850, right? So once you have one elementary school that's 850, you really have to start thinking, as you're building new schools, what does it look like to have fair facilities across the district? Walnut also is 850. DSC is a bit of an outlier because it was the first K through 5, right? Pre-K through 5. So it's built out at 1,100 and can take more capacity as we're going through this period of rapid expansion and pushing our student capacity to 120, 120%, and then moving, opening in their school, going from kind of busting at the seams, unfortunately, to like last year at DSC, just not being able to really breathe. And that's part of how we're fiscally responsible, because you don't want us to start opening schools that have 400 students and pay for teachers and administrators and AC and all those utilities. So the reason that elementary schools are at 850 is so that we have our schools looking the same across the campus, so that a child at Walnut has a substantially similar experience to a child at Rooster or Sycamore or Elementary 5.
Efficient size.
Right.
Yeah, I came from a district a couple of years ago, and it's the 800 to 900 elementary school size is a very common and a very efficient size. You get much bigger than 900, and it becomes a management issue for the campus administrators. If you get too small, then you're not being as efficient as you want to be. And when I started there were 10 elementary schools. They now have 27 elementary schools, and they're all built for that 800 to 900. Now sometimes they go to 120% capacity and have 4 or 5 portables, but there's always I guess the point being is that planning never stops, right? We're we right now are talking about elementary number 5. We own land for elementary number 5. We own land for 2 additional future elementary schools. So the district is looking at that future growth, and we're trying to stay ahead of not just looking at elementary number 5, which is the task at hand, but also making sure that we have the sites, that we're procuring those sites to deal with the growth over the next 10 to 15 years. And that's not only at the elementary school, it's also at the middle school and looking at the high school. And something to keep in mind here is, yes, we're talking about potentially there being multiple facilities on this site, but we're not putting them all there next year. That's something that would happen over the next 5+ years.
Well, I'll get back to this site. That second road off to the left is my property, which backs up to whatever that large green belt is right there. Lots of animals, lots of wildlife is in there, deer all over there. On Darden Hill, there have been 2 young people that have been killed in traffic accidents. There's a giant white cross out there. Brian snapped a picture of it again, a kid named Josh. So I know that you guys need to get ahead of that. Really, really need to get ahead of that, because I don't want to see kids dying on that road. I don't want to see people dying on that road. We've had 2 already in that stretch from 1826 to Enchanted Oaks. So, yeah, you're talking about putting a mega educational facility there, and there's not the road to hold up on.
Well, the cities and counties work with us to plan for what we're going to put in place. They will not go out and just build a road because there might be a future school on the side. Or they would have built Garden Hill Road 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, waiting for us to put a school. Now that we're saying we are going to put a school there, here's our plan, here's our timeline, now they have to put in place. We don't pay for the roads.
Oh, right.
They pay for the roads. And so now their planning process has to gear up similarly to ours. And there won't be that number the first time. It'll be an elementary school, 800 students, that's it. And then the board will make decisions for future schools or future facilities on that site. So that's our goal, is to work with the city and the county to say, get ready. We're going to put a school there, and help us with the lights and with the speed and with the turn and with widening it and all of that sort of thing. All of you have the same experience I do. I mean, cities are usually lagging. Counties are usually lagging in getting it done, and we can just hope there's no tragedy.
And that was part of the discussion that we had with them a few weeks ago, is that they had they had information already in place. They've done their plans and their studies, and what we gave them was additional information, and they know that we're doing a traffic study there, and they're going to be a part of that. And then when we get that here in the next 3, 4, 5 weeks, we are going to provide that information to them. So we're updating them with as much information as we can, as we kind of gather it and we kind of start moving forward. We have discussions with them on where are going to be curb cuts, where's entries and exits, the safety standpoint, how does the fire truck get there, kind of all those things. So it's certainly part of the process. We've tried to jump on board even before we've started a lot of the design work and things like that, so that we can get their input. We know what they have planned currently, but we also can give them some additional information so that they can look at it and see if they need to modify that.
There's also, just want to make another note, there is a pipeline right there on the property side. Or you're aware of that, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's that back corner where you can see the line.
Where the left-hand side there, there's a very large pipeline that goes behind, cuts through my property.
Gas or water?
Gas.
And we deal with that at Dripping Springs Elementary as well. There's a very large gas line that goes through there.
And that's part of that infrastructure investigation. We've done a survey, or a tree survey. When we have more of an idea of where the building's going to go, we'll get underground geotechnical, do environmental, do kind of all that infrastructure, where's gas, water, sanitary, kind of how to treat all those things. So that's definitely a part of this process too, is to make sure that we've got the right utilities kind of going inside to at the outset, make sure that we can take care of kind of the elementary school itself, but also, again, looking into the future about what potentially might be there, so that if we're going to make some decisions on how to make that happen, that we're not just fixing the issue right now, or not just getting what we need right now, but we're also looking into the future what we potentially might need down the line.
Can we go ahead and just kind of let Doug go ahead and work through the remainder of the elementary 5 presentation, and then we can open it up to general questions at the end?
All right, awesome. So the next slide actually kind of shows a little bit of a proportional kind of thing. I think one of the questions is how big is an elementary school site? Again, we've talked between about 10 and 15 acres. So we kind of took a general kind of generic kind of elementary school with parking and fields and kind of things like that. And out of 155 acres, we're looking at probably this project taking up about 8 or 9% of that entire site. So again, as we move forward into that feasibility study, what we're looking at is we're making sure that we find the best place for where the elementary school needs to go right now, but we're also leaving ourselves that flexibility and adaptability in the future as potentially some of those future developments might happen. So this is just kind of show you how big the site is, and we're basically taking up a little bit less than 10% of that site right at the outset. One of the things that we try to do before we start any project is really get a sense of what the community and what the teachers and what makes sense for this particular school. An elementary school in one district or one location can be very different from an elementary school in another district or another location, and really trying to go in and define what are those 5 or 6 or 10 really critical elements of kind of here are the top priorities that if we're going to do this, we need to solve these 5, 6, 10 different things to make sure that this is a successful school for this particular community, for these students, for these teachers. And so what we do when we have an existing campus is that we interview teachers, we interview administrators, we have meetings with the community, and we gather all that feedback. And we were able to do that for Walnut Springs and really had kind of a great process there. And with all those 6, 7 different groups of people, I think we ended up almost talking to 80 or 90 people when it was all said and done. And then we also did a survey and got information back from even more community members. And so that process has that built-in kind of group to kind of gather out information from. With elementary school number 5, we don't have that built-in group. So what we tried to do is we've tried to kind of take elements from other projects. So we've got all the information that we gathered from Walnut Springs, and they did a great job giving the teachers and community did a great job of kind of defining some of those priorities there. We also went back to some of the information that was gathered in programming and some of the information that came out of the Sycamore Springs elementary school, middle school project, and we kind of got information on things that they really liked or things kind of they wanted to look at a little bit more different. So we kind of took that information, and then what we like to get from you guys and from the teachers that we met earlier and that we'll meet tomorrow and throughout this process as we move forward, we'd like to get y'all's information on are we kind of targeting the right priorities right here? Are there other priorities maybe that we're not thinking about yet right now? And just kind of going through them. And again, if I'll kind of go through them, we can certainly backtrack to kind of look at some of the things and discuss a little bit more in detail. But anytime we start a school, one of the first conversations that we always have is safety. Safety to get onto the site, and from a general standpoint, we look at how students and teachers, how do they get from cars or buses into the thing? How does that entry work? How do you check into a school? Things like that. And then also just interiors, when kids are in their classrooms or in the gym and the cafeteria, what are the safety concerns that we need to do from that standpoint? One of the big discussions we have is just kind of what type of aesthetic does the school want to be? Does it want to be a little bit more of a low-scale school or a little bit more of a grand scale school? And the idea is that these are kids. These are kindergarten kids to 5th grade kids. There's a certain age group. And I think through all the discussions we have and through all the feedback that we have is just make sure these schools really work for these kids. These are not middle school kids. These are not high school kids. Let's make the building have a sense of wonder, a sense of comfort, a sense of home that really those kids can really connect with, and the teachers have a lot of opportunities to really make those kids really excited about being at school. Covered, protected, pick up and drop off. when you do have rain, it can be a very debilitating way of getting kids in and out of school. So just making sure that where we've got bus and where we've got parents and making sure that they've got a way to get out of their car and get into the building. Having some type of welcoming entry lobby. If you look at the schools, the elementary schools that you have right now, they all have a little bit of way of kind of right when you get into school, what does that area look like? And I think the consensus that we found so far is that we really want some place to, you're not just entering into a corridor or a small area. We want some type of space that kind of moves out and has a little bit of a gathering feel, a welcoming feel to it, and making sure that you've got kind of that really nice entry right when kids and teachers and parents enter into the building. Classroom size has been a huge discussion topic, just making sure that whether it's kindergarten kids that have a lot of stations and need to move around a lot, or whether they're fifth graders and they're just bigger kids that just need more space, and with furniture and differences with educational delivery techniques, just making sure that the classes are the right size for the right amount of students so that they can do the things that they need to do right now from an educational standpoint. Separate playgrounds. A lot of discussion, when you talk about doing a school, you certainly are designing a school, but it's equally important you're designing the exterior portions around that school, whether it's a courtyard, whether it's right adjacent to the school, it's a play activity area. But we've got playgrounds for primary kids, for secondary kids, we've got recess area, we've got gym area for kind of PE activities, potentially a track, things like that. So there's a lot of different outdoor activities that you need to make sure that those connections from indoor to outdoor are kind of the right connections, and you're allowing those teachers to get from point A to point B as easily as possible. That goes into that track and play field area as well. Also kind of what materials. One of the things we've seen with recess is that area gets used again and again, day to day, with almost every kid in the school. Maybe that's not grass, maybe that's astroturf, maybe that's kind of a different material that allows a little bit more durability there, so that you're not kind of having a big dirt area kind of right next to your school. Look at kind of acoustics. Acoustics was a big topic, and look at what are quiet areas of the school versus maybe a little bit more noisy areas of school, and making sure that you kind of have some of those separations there, so you're not putting kind of a super loud area right next to an area that needs a lot of more concentrated, focused work, and really kind of looking at those relationships, not just from a functional and an educational standpoint, but also an acoustical standpoint. And then again, flexible furnishings. One of the big things that we've seen kind of educationally over the last decade, 10 years or so, is this change of furniture. The whole idea that a student's going to sit at a desk with, kind of a tabletop there and listen to a lecture for, pretty much every period of the day. That just doesn't happen as much anymore. And as those delivery methods have changed within the classroom, you're looking at kind of having different types of furniture for those kids to kind of be in and work collaboratively and kind of work together in teams. Grade level collaboration areas. This is something else that we've seen again and again over the last decade is really a lot of project team kind of educational things where kids are coming together to work together in groups rather than individually, and let's work to kind of make sure that we've got some of those functions. Adequate storage, just making sure that you've got enough space to put all the different educational things. Pen-up areas and to showcase student work and things like that. When it comes down to it, when a parent walks in, what they want to see more than anything else is their students' work, their kids' work, and just being able to kind of provide spaces throughout the school, outside classrooms, up at that front lobby area, kind of different areas to make sure that you're really showcasing the students themselves and their work and things like that, making sure that those opportunities are in place. Something, the corridor mark with moving kids from point A to point B, second grade, first grade can be a little bit of an adventure sometimes, and giving kind of the teachers a little bit of a tool to kind of help kind of lead those kids where they need to be. That's something that we heard again and again. Appropriate height furnishings. There's a big difference between a kindergarten size kid and a fifth grade kid, and making sure that potties and cabinets and kind of things that they access on a day-to-day basis kind of all make sense with the age and the size of the kids. Good acoustics, that kind of go back to what we kind of talked about earlier. Ventilation where needed. Again, not something maybe you think about every day, but if you're in a class or a space that you need that ventilation, then it becomes a really important issue. So having those conversations about making sure that we have that mechanical electrical, kind of those infrastructure kind of things really make sense. They can really kind of make a day-to-day difference in the teachers' and students' lives. Classroom toilet sink adjacencies. There are some areas of an elementary school where you've got kind of multi-fixture toilets, and you've got other areas that have single toilets kind of in the room. And just making sure that you kind of understand where those are, how kids access those, what kind of supervision teachers need, and kind of things like that, and making sure that kind of all that works together. And then distributed teacher toilets. That speaks for itself. But those were kind of some of the initial ideas and thoughts and priorities that we've gathered from those teachers, the community members, from Sycamore, from Sycamore Springs, and from Walnut Springs. But we're still gathering that information. We had a great meeting kind of right before this meeting where we got some additional information. We'll continue to work with the teachers from every campus in the district to kind of make sure that we're heading down the right path to meet these goals, as well as whatever other goals that we kind of come up with. But we'd love to get y'all's feedback on some of these things right here. And do these all make sense? Are there other ones maybe that we haven't addressed or touched on a little bit?
I don't, that all sounds very thoughtful and needed. And this is outside of the classroom, which is, this school is going in the dark sky communities.
Yes.
So anything we can do to just be that partner in a dark sky community, low lights, low signs, light shining down.
And that's something I know that we're doing with the existing schools right now. That's a big part of the 2018 bond, and definitely the school is going to follow that example.
Right.
Any other dark sky?
No, I mean, it'll absolutely be dark sky compliant. I think the rules changed again, this past in 2016, yep. So it'll be to the 2016 dark sky compliant.
That's wonderful.
What about the football stadium at Sycamore Springs? You can see those lights all the time until late at night.
And so I wasn't a part of that project, so
I
don't know
understand.
Yeah, well, and
You're saying they're followed and they have.
Sure, those are Musco lights, and while I understand that you can certainly see them,
My neighborhood.
you can see them. But when I think about the technology that goes into stadium lights now compared to 15, 20 years ago, you used to, you think about the difference between our lights, the lights and like the lights at the fields on the baseball, softball fields over here at Sportsplex and also DSISD. The light glow from the fields over here.
It doesn't matter. You just said y'all are going to abide by.
It is, well,
so
the site lighting abides by dark skies. For sports lighting, yes, there's an exception process that you can go through for those specific extracurricular, but those aren't lights that on, like your security lighting is on at night to provide security. The sports light stadium lighting is only on when you have that event going on.
Yeah, it goes on and on and on. So believe me, I'll take pictures. So.
Well, I mean, we work really hard to try and minimize that, and I'm glad to share my email address or contact information. Or if you have those problems, you can contact me directly, and I'll make sure that it's addressed.
So did you guys consider rainwater collection or any landscaping, anything else?
I think that's one of the exciting parts that we, kind of going back to here, is that we actually have already some built-in areas on the site that have been developed for some of that, and some of our initial conversations with our consultants as we brought them on board are some of those opportunities. And I think on this site in particular, we've got some areas that maybe potentially we don't just collect water on the roof or condensate or things like that, but we might be able to even, from a site standpoint, collect water and kind of pull irrigation and pull water out of that. We don't have all that planned yet, but those conversations have started. We see some really interesting opportunities to be able to do something.
Especially once you start to add impervious cover there, there's streams and rivers that run across that, into that lake right there.
And as we started doing kind of our initial investigations earlier in the summer on the site, those those kind of existing paths of drainage and kind of things like that. We've got a great civil engineer on board, and he's started to look at those things. And then as we move forward with this feasibility and kind of locating the elementary school and potentially other things on there, we're trying to really work with the topography, really try to work with those natural drainage areas, and again, hopefully take advantage of some of the things that are already naturally out there. And then if we can kind of use those both from an efficiency standpoint, but even potentially as an educational standpoint for the kids, and you know, you've got something like that, you could have some type of natural science kind of thing out there where you can start doing some things. So we love that, and we've already kind of started some of those conversations.
Yeah, and you know, just for aesthetics, and being your neighbor, I mean, I would love to see landscaping out there. I'd love to see trees get planted again. You know, whatever we can do to beautify the campus, not just for not just for us, but for the kids and everybody else who are out there. Like Sycamore right now feels a little bit bare.
It's an interesting campus in that you've got this wonderful kind of tree line kind of going around here, and you know, on top of the high point, but then you have, you know, you kind of have a field area as well. And one of the things as we start looking at kind of picking where it goes and start developing is, you know, what can we do, not just to really make the areas around the campus, how does that fit into the overall site? How does that really kind of fit in, you know, with what's already there? We want to really try to highlight what's there and accent it rather than kind of change it up.
One thing you might consider then is pushing that parking lot to the side of the school rather than having it be the marquee item in front of it. Because that's the first thing you see when you're having to see the school.
Well, and that's a great conversation piece right there, is that, you know, just in some of our first initial conversations, it's, you know, is the building entry to the north? Is it to the side? You know, kind of where does that building entry? How do those drive areas get to that entry, or maybe a second point of access for buses and kids, and kind of what makes the most sense? So as we move forward, not just with the feasibility, but getting into the actual school design, one thing that we try to do right at the outset is we don't just look at one or two options. We try to look at 10, 12, 15 different options and some of them maybe we have an idea that probably isn't going to work, but we need to spend some time on it just to investigate and see kind of where it might lead. And through that investigation and that constant kind of contrast and comparison with the other schemes and things like that, you can kind of start narrowing what works and what doesn't work, and kind of things like that. So that absolutely will be stuff as we really continue into design to really start looking a little bit more in detail.
So I had a question. That little 5-acre slice right south of Sawyer Ranch Road, that has been sold by the district as that was supposed to be the controlled entry exit point for this whole campus. And I saw that your diagram had it going directly onto Darden Hill Road. Can you speak to that and to what degree that will be used there, that 5 acres, the primary entry exit point for that, or whether that was even a consideration with your plan?
I'm not sure I understood the question there.
There's that little 5-acre slice right there directly south of Sawyer Ranch Road.
Yeah,
that little kind of peninsula. And so Superintendent Gehring has repeatedly said that the reason the district bought that was so that they can control that intersection. That was going to be the primary entrance and exit point from this massive campus that they were planning. And I saw on your design that it showed entry and exit directly onto Darden Hill. So I was just curious as to whether that was communicated to you and part of your plan, or what how that factors into this design.
Well, I think right now, again, at this point, you know, we've looked at certain parts of the thing, but we're really kind of pulling back a little bit to make sure that we kind of really investigate and look and get as much feedback from you guys and teachers and things like that. What we do know is that there are going to be immediate needs as well as long-term needs, and wherever kind of we end up with this elementary school, whether it's at that corner or a different corner or back further in the, you know, whatever, we're going to make sure that we meet those current needs. That may not have anything to do with that intersection right now. We just don't know yet. You know, potentially into the future, that certainly might be something that ends up happening.
You made such a strong point about, you seem to think it was so important at Walnut Springs in the middle school for that to be a one entry and exit. I just wondered if you're applying the same philosophy, I guess, to this site.
Well, I think one of the most important things that we always look at from a design standpoint is opportunities. You know, we want to make sure that at the outset or anything that we're doing right now, that we leave as many opportunities as possible. And going through this feedback loop where we're looking at stuff, doing some analyzation, doing some sketch design work, things like that, bringing it back to you guys, to teachers, to kind of different groups to get different viewpoints, and constantly kind of going through that cycle. So what you want to do when you start that cycle is you want to have as many opportunities as possible so that you can look at as many potential opportunities. But until you really kind of get into it, you don't know where those potentials might be. So that's, having that land right there, that's great. That gives us additional options to kind of look at.
Transportation plan for that property, I guess.
Well, I think that's probably part of the feasibility study, is to start looking at how you might move people off of Dart and onto the site, where things might go. But again, a feasibility study is just a feasibility study.
That's going to be something that occurs in the future, or will not be occurring? Can you clarify?
Well, I think that process is starting kind of right now. We've done some investigation. We're pulling back a little bit so that we can get that additional information and feedback from you guys.
The site's still in flux, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Thank you.
So that's what I'm very confused about, you're saying, and I like that you're saying that you're pulling back and you're getting more information, because right now it seems like we're building this school, but it's happening here, and come on in and find out more of what we want to do about it. And I'm glad that you're open to where should it be. And that's what I'm very concerned about, is I want it to be responsible, thoughtfully placed on that property. It's a beautiful piece of property. It's a prime piece of property because there's a lot of wildlife. The golden cheek warbler lives there. It's an endangered species. Right there where I am, there's Coyote Canyon in the back on that high point. We have lots of coyotes back there, lots of deer. They feed off the deer. So when that construction starts, all those animals are coming. I can just tell you they will, because they're already there and they live back there. And that is a great opportunity to teach kids about wildlife and that kind of thing.
Well, what we know with our experience is that we think that the best final result from a design, from a project standpoint, always comes with getting as much feedback as possible.
Thank you.
Everybody has a different perspective. Everybody has a different viewpoint. And the more people that you can reach out to and get those different ideas and thoughts, and look at this, or this is a concern, things like that, it helps us so much, because when we start a project, we want to start kind of with this full view of anything's possible. But then as we start talking to people and getting that feedback and hearing those priorities, what are the important things that the community and the teachers and the district wants to accomplish, it starts kind of telling us what path to go down, and as we get further and kind of have more detailed discussions, we narrow that focus and heads us in that right direction for that final kind of best possible solution for everyone involved. And so we really appreciate and we love kind of the input that you guys, the teachers earlier today, and kind of everyone else who's kind of put in kind of that feedback for us to kind of start the process from and look forward to. So this helps us hopefully do the best work that we can do for you guys and your students.
And you kids have been out to that property.
Yes.
Right. And you've seen, because it's very rural.
It's beautiful.
There's not,
It's
I mean,
absolutely
the Sycamore Springs Elementary School is lovely. I pass by it going in and out of there all the time. I'm not sure that design would look nice on that property.
And that gets back to that one, kind of that second aesthetic thing, is that we've really had a lot of discussions about what makes the most sense. And the projects that we've done for the district so far, the high school project, Walnut Springs, and kind of where we are in that project and this project, are three very different projects, and that one's going on an existing campus with a certain aesthetic. We're putting a new building on the middle school that has a certain thing. And this is it's a brand new site. We're setting kind of the tone for not just what we're doing right now, but also any of the future work that might possibly be there. So we know that this first phase is very critical. It's very important to make sure that we site it right, and that once we actually get into the design, that the design really kind of sets a tone for what potentially might be there in the future. We know that those decisions that we're making right now are going to have kind of that future impact for whatever else might be built there in the future.
I think your comment about potential for student learning, some kind of outdoor ed or some kind of thing, is an important piece of feedback for us, just because of the property. I know you have your hand up and you're next. I want to address your comment about the internal transportation, because we had a lot of conversation initially about the external, the roads that the county controls and the lighting and all of that, and the frustration from 1826 over. That Sawyer Ranch Road, I predict, I don't know, but I predict it won't end at Darden Hill forever, you know, that it will continue and that there will be other growth out in that area. What we can pay attention to and what we are paying attention to is that internal transportation on that site. We don't want cars and buses and elementary kids and middle school kids crossing, and so having that is a big part of our planning process, is the road system and the parking system on the site. So while we're planning elementary school 5 now, we're also thinking, okay, if there were in another scenario of different schools, how might those internal, it's a huge part of the planning process. So you bring up a good point of the parts we can control, and that is one of them that's a tremendous impact, because you don't want some of those things to mix.
It was sold as a safety feature by having everyone enter and exit, and so that was my concern, that the drawing, or the diagram showed it, those two entry and
well,
exits.
we may not build that road until those future facilities are there. We're thinking about it all the time.
So I guess I was just questioning whether there would be like a central parkway through the site that all the schools would
Probably perimeter, because you got fields and you got other things.
My comment was, could you put the one drawing, the schematic drawing up? Because my comment was on internal driving, and as you said, because we've been at Walnut and both the high schools and both the middle schools, and Sycamore's parking lot it's a horrific Thunderdome of drop-offs, so avoid that. But what I'm wondering from you guys is that, could you tell me what you're, just based on what you have here, and
that's not even a schematic right there.
Okay, so here's my comment. If this is an example of something to talk to, where you have parking in the front and you have it looks like a loop of some sort at the front, and in the back, I'm guessing by the pond, might be crossing sort of thing. It's not big enough for parents to be driving in. You're going to have a bottleneck like you do at Walnut right now, all the way out to 290, because that initial drive into the elementary school is not large enough. And so based on what you have here is my comment. So you design how you're going to design, and we'll come to those comments, give those comments when you have another design. But all I'm saying is the loop that you have around the water, that could be a perfect parent loop, because it's much, much bigger. And you know that there's no neighborhood. These kids aren't walking. They're all going to be bused. They're all going to be parents. And based on being a parent from Walnut, most of them are going to be in a car, and they're all going to be showing up at 2:30 to try and get the best parking space. And now you're all bottlenecked onto Darden, getting on and off. So very conscious, because Sycamore is not good. There are multiple bottlenecks within the parking lot. The middle school itself is not a good parking situation. Kids wandering around and teachers do. There's multiple choke points that are built into that parking lot. It's not good. So extreme care with what you know, that there's going to be a lot of parents that are going to be driving. They just don't depend that they're all going to take buses, because they're not.
And that goes back to a number of different issues, not only from how to get people into and out of the site, but it's also a safety issue. And I know, one of the, again, kind of going back to when you have a project like this, half the project is the building, but the other half is the site. It's the play fields for the kids and things like that, but it's also the parking and kind of how vehicles and pedestrians kind of move across that. So one of the things that we're always looking at very early on in the process is to really look at that stack space, not only for getting into the project or into the site, but also out of the site, making sure that, do you need 80 cars stacked? Do you need 120 cars stacked? Do you need 160 cars stacked? But really work.
My only comment to you is, we just built Sycamore. It's bad. So I will be at the next few of these to make sure the parking lot is not awful.
And again,
they're bad. They are not.
And I will note, there's a new architect
holding this conversation. That's good, So- because if
Just
you ever
so
show
you
up
make
at
that
4
note.
o'clock and sit on Sawyer Ranch trying to get in.
Yeah. I think what we want to say is we agree, I agree with what you're saying completely. I know that, I get it, and I've had kids, and we've been that part of that process. I see it here, I've seen it at other districts I've been at. So absolutely critical. I appreciate you bringing up that point, and that is a very much an important part of our conversation. And so,
We'll be watching.
yes.
We've got great feedback from Walnut Springs and from Sycamore about a lot of those issues, and those are part of that program that we've tried to pull from different sources for this project right here. We've had some good discussions on that. Yes, sir.
I know you're an architect, so you know this. There needs to be a master plan for that site
Yes.
before you dig that first footing. I mean, I hope somebody is working on an overall master plan. It's one thing to design the school, the little elementary school, and it can basically go just about anywhere.
And the feasibility part.
It's got to be in the right place, or you're going to waste a lot of money.
Well,
And that's one of the reasons to have these kind of meetings, is to get the input to help us develop that feasibility, which then ultimately turns into a master plan for the site.
And that's why we were talking about Darden Hill. I don't think you can build this without being very, very thoughtful about what's going to happen on Darden Hill. You can't. You've got to do it together.
Yeah.
And that's why when we're hearing, okay, school is going to be built in 2021, whatever that time frame is, thinking there's no way we can't even get a right-hand turn lane off of 1826 onto Darden Hill to stop people from killing each other and backing each other. I mean, so now, and then we're looking at, okay, we're going to have a large complex here that's feeding in from Darden Hill onto this lovely land with all these kids and parents and buses. Let's not forget the buses. I'm not happy about the bus barn up there, but I understand.
So I definitely, we understand you have control over what's on that property, but I don't know if you can have a collaborative meeting with the county where we can be there.
Yeah,
Because,
that's
I mean,
something needed.
You represent our interest in the school, the rest of us, we're definitely interested in the infrastructure. If we do this right, we won't regret it.
Right.
I mean, you're looking at a college campus there, right? You guys should think about, this is a college campus, right? You create something like that and put the infrastructure in place, and we'll all be very happy.
And we've started that process, and I think you're exactly right. When we start gathering that additional information, we know that we're going to kind of bring everyone kind of back to the table, and all that stuff. We want to make sure that we get as much feedback once we have some of that additional information.
And I think we can collaborate with the county, right?
Absolutely.
Maybe one of us doesn't have the same power as you sitting on one side of the table, us, and the county sitting there. I own a half mile of frontage of Darden Hill, so I have a vested interest in making sure that they do the right thing. And I don't want to see, I mean, if you drive by my fence, you'll see it's down almost the whole way from the cars going through it. But we definitely need to plan properly so we don't have accidents and other things.
I agree. Can I ask a favor of you guys, when you put up anything, DS, of Dripping Springs in the school district, that map, can you go back to the map that has the Darden Hill on it? Can you widen that? Because just beyond where you have on the right-hand side is that nice loop around, which is where everybody's supposed to go 20 miles an hour. And there's been lots of people that have been in that ditch. And so what's going to happen is when this school gets open and you're drawing all those kids coming in, that's going to be a huge problem.
That big curve,
Well,
that's our curve. Yeah.
They're going to be drawn from
That's our-
1826,
every time it
Sawyer
rains,
Ranch,
it'll-
and Darden Hill, and 150.
Yeah.
They're going to be coming from all of it.
Yeah, so it's not just that little spot you have from Sawyer Ranch to just beyond your site. It's that large curve. That's a large.
And I'll double check the parameters of the traffic study that we've looked at. Just verify that.
Yeah.
So
You'll-
they've been
you'll
out
put that
surveying
on
private
there. That would
areas.
be helpful because that should help you guys. I mean, those big buses going around there, you drove out
I
there.
drove.
Did you drive that? Did you
Yeah.
like it? Was it fast?
There's been no less than 10 accidents on the curve. And
So-
we've had people run into a dump truck, we've had all kinds of other stuff, which is,
Every time
for
it
high
rains.
school kids, that's going to be a challenge.
That's going to be a problem. Well, like I said, there's already been a high school kid that was killed there in 2000.
Yes, and on the French's property too, which is right next to us.
I don't know if it's coming up further in your presentation, but last night at the school board meeting, you talked about where you thought the elementary would be located, the middle school and the high school. Maybe if you run through that, it might help with some of these questions. Then also, there were two schematics last night. I don't know if you're getting to that in your presentation or not, but.
So again, I think at this point, what we're doing is we're pulling back a little bit.
Okay.
And we've looked at the site, we've looked at some of the building stuff, but I think right now, what we're trying to do is to kind of reach back out and kind of pull back a step, gather some more information from you guys, from the teachers, and really get kind of some more of those broad perspective views, and then kind of take that information in, and then kind of go back and look at the overall site and look at the building itself. So that's kind of where we are right now, and again, just trying to get kind of additional information so that we've got kind of those.
Yeah, I think the indoor-outdoor connection, and I guess for general concepts, that indoor-outdoor connection is important, especially on this type of land. And like I said, at Walnut Springs, people move out here because they don't want the Austin schools. So I think it's important for the district to differentiate its buildings and kind of the educational experience it gives to students when it has opportunities to do so. I know that like a lot of people in this area send their kids to Austin Waldorf School, which is an entirely different concept than Dripping Springs, but it's a lot of outdoor nature stuff, and there's people like trees, they like nature, they want a little bit more space, that's why they're out here. So the more you can do outdoor learning, the more you can do, especially when you're in contact with dirt, germs, and stuff like that. I think it's good for kids, not just the sanitized AstroTurf spaces. So all that's important.
On the Walnut Springs, Corgan Middle School project, working with both those two campuses, a lot of those discussions have led towards not just kind of, whether it's collaborative or whatever, not just improvements in the building or the new building, but we've had just as many conversations about those indoor-outdoor connections, and again, trying to kind of create those opportunities, and not so much defining you're going to use this for this, but hey, here's this space that you can gather a number of classrooms together, or you've got access to kind of that tree line to the south there. So those discussions we know were so important over at that site. We know that this site has just as many opportunities and great outdoor areas that hopefully we can kind of find ways to connect with for the students.
Always part of your scope, right? You talked about like nature trails at Walnut Springs.
Absolutely, yeah.
Campus, and concepts like that, I think you can enjoy.
Yeah, you really start looking at kind of a lot of that land down there, and you can really start seeing some neat opportunities.
Spaces that the community can utilize for recreation or events, etc. Walking trails and neighbors can access, I think that would all be helpful too.
And start kind of connecting everything.
Build a community around this school instead of having to get back into town.
Good.
Are you guys doing this presentation tomorrow night too over at Rooster?
Yes, ma'am.
Same thing?
Yeah. So I believe we've got another teacher meeting. We met with Dripping Springs Elementary and Walnut Springs teachers this morning, or right before here, to get their information. We're going to meet Rooster Springs and Sycamore Springs teachers tomorrow, as well as also kind of having a little bit of a, more of a neighborhood kind of meeting to talk about some of those things directly.
If there's any more questions, we'll be happy to answer more questions. If you want to stay and ask us individually, we'll be happy to do that. Appreciate you being here. That's one thing that we talked about, is there is another meeting tomorrow. It's at 5:30. It's not at 6. It'll be at 5:30 at Rooster Springs. And so we weren't really expecting necessarily so many of the neighbors to be here tonight, but we have a Dale Whitaker, our Director of Communications, is starting an email list to try to provide information to the people who are the neighbors of the Garden Hill property. So if you don't, have you seen anything out yet?
Yeah, we found some of them off of the Hicks County.
Okay. So if you're already getting something?
We started to put together an email list, but, more people that are interested. We just got the ones that were immediately around them, basically, so, okay, I'd like you to go ahead.
So if you don't mind, before you leave, if you will put your name and email address on there, she'll add it to her list, and then we'll make sure that we...
Repeat when the next meeting is for community, for the neighbors, I'm sorry.
Well, tomorrow, we're meeting again tomorrow at 5:30.
So I think it's reasonable to assume that everybody in the room will be willing to have another meeting at this point when we build the list and are able to get more people there. We're not trying to fasten the process. We're trying to move forward, realizing that we've got some shortcomings we need to fill in some goals.
And I think there's some important discussion, which is, the points I know that was made, is that so often it's talked about a master plan for the site or a feasibility study. And so we have some preliminary but we're going to be developing some more and looking at some different things. And so before we ever turn a shovel and turn over dirt, we will have a master plan that says this could work here, and then what the board or the community decides, long-term to put there. But we want to make sure that we don't turn dirt and then we shot ourselves in the foot and we can't do what we need to do long-term for the district. So that is actually absolutely a critical process, and we're going to make sure we get that big rock taken care of first before we do anything. So anyway,
Who's actually putting that together?
So
Corgan?
they're running the feasibility and putting the drawings together using information that we're providing, and then what we'll do is we will provide it to the board when we're ready. So watch for that. We'll provide that information to the board to let them look at it, and we'll look at the different things. So obviously, be communicating with them, and so yeah, we want to make sure that we're taking the appropriate steps, that we don't get ahead of ourselves. And I think Dr. Wellman said it, well today. She's like, we don't get out in front of our skis, which a little bit, and that's why we pulled back a little bit, and that's why we're taking this approach here. So appreciate the feedback. It's very, very good.
So ultimately, yeah, the district kind of drives that with the input that we get through these meetings, and then Corgan kind of helps us facilitate that with their expertise and the ability to place those things, on paper so that we can provide an actual good, accurate visual representation so that it makes sense when, as we kind of talk through it.
All right.
And thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And we will continue this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't forget your emails.